Welcome back. Now, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme has apologized to all students who could not receive their allowances on time. And this after the Sunday Times newspaper at the weekend published a story on how thousands of NSFAS financially funded students have been left starving without food and money due to non-payment of their allowances. NSFAS has meanwhile said that one of the reasons for the delay in payment of allowances was not a NSFAS-generated problem, but was instead because of the university's data adjustment process submitted to NSFAS. Now, last month, a damning report was released on the entity's procurement systems, resulting in the removal of its former Chief Executive Officer, Andile Nongogo. For an update on this matter, we are joined virtually now by Asive Dlanjwa, who's National Spokesperson of the South African Union of Students, and Slumezi Skosana, Spokesperson of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Gentlemen, good morning. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, to you and your viewers and your listeners. Thank you for having us.
Good morning, Sakina.
Mr. Skosana, let me start with you. So we understand that some of the beneficiaries have since been paid since the headlines hit the media this past weekend. But give us a sense of where things are right now, because you've also come out to say, as the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, that this was essentially not a problem of your making. So just give us context of what is currently happening.
Thank you very much, Sakina. Yes, you are correct that since the publication of the article at the weekend, we have made tremendous progress. For example, we analyzed the data that had discrepancies for the University of the Northwest as well as Stellenbosch. And over the weekend, we were able to disperse the allowances. And the other affected universities, as a result of this, we've been working around the clock, to make sure that we do the right payments for the right beneficiaries, because we picked up certain discrepancies, such as, for example, where you would find one ID being replicated 10 times for different claims. So once that is picked up, the system flags it, and it's only prudent and responsible for us to check whether it could be a systems error or a deliberate false claim.
So, Mr. Skosana, as we speak right now, how many beneficiaries have yet to receive their allowances?
Well, it's. I think, Sakina, it's important to understand that the context of these late payments is not that the overall system is not dispersing the allowance. It's the exceptions that we are dealing with right now. The major hurdle has been around the University of, for example, Venda, where the data has not been matching the way we would expect, and there are delays in dispersing, but we're working on those exceptions. So if I were to put or give a percentage, I would say the majority of disbursements have been made, and I just can't, as of this morning, put a percentage on that. But what we are gunning for as NSFAS is that latest by Friday and soonest by tomorrow, these allowances should have been paid.
Mr. Dlanjwa, let me bring you in from a student perspective. Are you able to give us a sense of the struggles that beneficiaries are going through at the moment? And also, from your perspective, how many students, if you're able to quantify, are still awaiting their payments?
Good morning, Sakina, once again. It has been an absolutely devastating time for our students, as one would imagine. Because more especially so, in fact, because some of the students have started to write their examinations, and they have obviously not been able to have the necessary, necessities such as food, toiletries, and some sanitary products, etc. So it has been very devastating. And although we want to appreciate the explanation given by NSFAS, which seeks to suggest that this delay would have been caused by due diligence, it is very difficult to accept such, because it is not the first time the students have to be paid. It cannot be that every month, without fail, we sit with thousands of students that are not able to receive their allowances on time for one reason or the other. It is also unfortunate that we would have received some reports from some institutions who claim that they would have submitted their data on time and correctly, and yet some of their students would still not have been paid. I can give you an example of one of the universities that, for instance, would not be in that statement, would be the University of the Free State. One thing we know for sure is that we are sitting with thousands across the country who have still not received their allowances. And unfortunately, there is no sense as to when will these students receive their allowances, albeit be that they are writing their exams. So it has really been a devastating time, Sakina. One really cannot begin to imagine what the students are going through right now.
Mr. Dlanjwa, is it correct, because I saw somewhere that there are claims that some of the delays go back to the month of May?
No, that is very correct. We've got students since May who have never received the allowances to date. We have written and have been reflecting some of the students to the scheme, and unfortunately we have not been able to receive a response on the students as to what are some of the issues. You will remember, even based on the statement of NSFAS themselves, that although I think about a month or so ago, they were sitting on 98% on students that had been onboarded onto the new system, still 10% of all NSFAS beneficiaries were not receiving their allowances. NSFAS claims it was because they have not been KYC'd, etc. But the bottom line is that we are sitting with tens of thousands of students that have not been receiving their allowances, some of them since May and up until this point in time. So it is really a dire situation for the students. So it is correct, the claims that there are some students who have not received their allowances since May up until today.
Mr. Skosana, what would be the reason for that? You know, why is it taking so long in certain instances to actually reconcile the data?
Well, what happened with regard to the situation that Mr. Dlanjwa seems to be referring to is that when NSFAS made an announcement that it was going to take over the disbursements of these allowances, some institutions went ahead and paid these allowances, which meant that NSFAS needed to reimburse the institution, in the following month. But what happened then when these institutions filed their claim for the reimbursement, there was dissonance in the data. There were discrepancies in the data. That is, if somebody gives you, when you are ready to pay as NSFAS based on the data received directly to the student, the data looks this way. But now when reimbursement is requested, suddenly there's a change, either in the number of the students being claimed for, or in the amount of money to be paid, given the change in maybe module load or, cancellations of modules and so on. So that has taken longer to reconcile, but that part is what has caused the delay over the months, as opposed to the current delay that we are addressing now.
So I suppose in the end, Mr. Skosana, one would want to see the end of this problem. Can you give any sort of indication as to when the system would be totally cleaned up and we would stop seeing these sort of delays?
Yes, the board together with management is involved in a major or in a massive corrective action that seeks to address, all these glitches that have been there. And we have decided, to huddle up and work in close partnership with with the institutions, so that when the information is put on the data adjustment process, it could be done right. so that there's no incompatibility of information, because as soon as there's incompatibility of information, the system flags it and blocks the payment, because the suspicion is that some ghost learner could be paid for or something. So we are working on refining the system, and I do anticipate that come next year, we would not have glitches of this nature, and the money will be paid or dispersed, to the rightful beneficiaries. And it's just disheartening that it happened at the time when the students are writing, and I'm very empathetic and sympathetic to that fact. And I hope that we would be in a position to resolve this expeditiously, like I indicated, with the timeframes that I just shared with you.
And I'm going to put this question to both of you regarding the actual disbursements, because I did touch on it in my introduction. But let me start, Mr. Skosana, with you regarding the payments. NSFAS seemingly still continuing paying beneficiaries through some companies after they were named in a report for alleged tender contractual discrepancies. Is that correct? Is that ongoing? And if so, why?
Well, Sakina, I think there's a need for us to separate between the technical capacity and capabilities of these payment aggregation companies and the way in which they were procured. I think there's a difference there. The current delays and challenges do not speak to the technical capacity of these fintech companies or partners, to assist us in dispersing this money efficiently to the students. They have done that. They've done that well. But the irregularity of their appointment, as per report, from the attorneys, it's something that is dealt with separately, and the board has indicated that it will implement the report of the attorneys in its entirety. And I think some of the results of that implementation would have been seen in the termination of the CEO's contract, as well as the current engagements with the companies dispersing the funds.
Asive, I want your view on this as well, because students have raised concern over the new NSFAS direct payment system. Some of the financial companies contracted to disburse the allowances have been named in that report. So what are your comments on this?
Sakina, I must say we had always supported a system in which students would be able to receive their allowances directly and remove all middlemen, which precipitated for a lot of corruption in the disbursement. That's a principle. But what we had always been of the view, and this was evident in the manner in which students had not been able to get their allowances monthly and on time, was that those companies lacked the requisite capacity and the competency to be able to carry out that grave mandate. So we welcomed, obviously, that their contracts be terminated, and we would hope that that be done, that be expedited. But one thing that remains, and which worries us, that even once they have been removed, it would appear that the suffering is still going to persist for the students, is that the system itself at NSFAS, and I think we also need to look at even the competency of some of the people that have to carry out this, their responsibilities at NSFAS outside the companies. Because, for instance, Sakina, I don't think we are realizing here that I respect my colleague Andile Nongogo, but he just spoke English. There was absolutely no explanation or accountability that has been given as to why would more than 50 to 60,000 students, as we're sitting right now, not have received their allowances since May. And that's a fact, based on their own statements and their own numbers. So that tells you that we have a far bigger crisis and a far bigger problem. And I think even the sympathy and the empathy that Mr. Skosana speaks of is just mere rhetoric, because up until today, there is no plan. On a single day, we have been sending hundreds and hundreds of numbers and ID numbers to NSFAS to inquire about these students, thousands of them who up until today have not received their allowances. We are having this interview because of students whose allowances were delayed in October, but we are not speaking of the thousands of students that have still not received it since May. And unfortunately, except for a few rhetoric English words here and there, Mr. Skosana is not able to take us as a country into confidence as to what is the issue with those students. When will they be receiving the allowances? That is what we want, not, to dilly-dally. And that is honestly, so it tells you that there's a far bigger crisis, even bigger than these fintech companies, because when they are gone tomorrow, the students will still not be receiving the allowances. I think that is what we need to be speaking about.
That's unfortunately all we have time for. But thanks so much for your time this morning. Asive Dlanjwa, National Spokesperson of the South African Union of Students, and Slumezi Skosana, Spokesperson of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, talking about the payment delays affecting thousands of students.